Welcome back to the channel. If you watch my previous video, you probably know that I already purchased another bike. So today I'm actually working on a baseline. So I love to get a new bike and also, I love to be able to establish that new baseline. This new bike has 52,000 miles on the clock. So I really want to make it so that I can take it to that 100,000 miles like I talked about in my last vlog. So today I'm actually working on establishing a baseline by changing the oil, doing a little bit of a fluid exchange in the brake system, and then starting to work on some of those things so I can establish a baseline and know everything is in good place so I can take it to that 100,000 miles, hopefully pretty soon.
So for the oil change, you're gonna need a ratchet with a 17mm socket, as well as the oil filter. I'm using the 204 for this bike. Pliers, unless your oil filter has a wrench or a socket in the back. And finally some tools so you can remove the fairings. I started by letting the bike idle for a few minutes until reaching that operating temperature. One of the benefits of having a touring bike is that center stand, so I'm just going to use it so I can keep my bike level. After that, I started by removing all the bolts so I can remove the fairing, at least just the side panel on the left, so you can expose the oil filter and it's easy for you to work on everything that's underneath it. With my left fairing off, now I can protect my floor with some cardboard for any accidental spills, and I bring my drain pan. Now it's time to remove that oil drain bolt with your 17mm socket. Now with the oil draining, this is a great opportunity for us to take a look at the oil and check for any shavings. And don't forget to crack open your oil cap just so you can let air in the system and get rid of all that oil. So upon inspection, the bike had the racing version of the high flow filter, so it has that knot in the back, so I used my 17mm socket to remove the oil filter. Cool. So at this point, I'm installing the oil filter. I don't have the racing version, so I'm just using the attachment just to grab it at the end of the filter. And now I'm gonna start to applying pressure until it doesn't move anymore. Please you don't have to crush it. I'm not using a torque wrench here, but if you can just use it, but just put it by hand, give it a couple turns, and you should be good to go. Cool. So with the drain bolt on, I'm now just cleaning the exhaust to make sure that there's no smokes when I start the bike. And since talking about oil is actually more complicated than talking about politics, I decided not to talk about the oil, but I did add oil to my system, and then I started the process of running the bike, waiting for a couple minutes for the oil to come down, and then I will recheck the level, add if needed, until the level is on the second line on that window. Alright, cool. So I repeated the process for a couple times because I did not want to overfill the system. So I let the bike run in idle for a couple minutes, and then I will wait for a couple minutes again to wait for the level to come up. And now that it's on the second line, I'm ready to start my fairings. Cool. So another area that has been neglected by the previous owner, sadly, is giving maintenance to the chain. So at this point, you guys know that I love to use kerosene just to clean my chain, but I did not have some, so I'm just using a little bit of WD-40 just so I can lose some of that or break down some of that nasty dirt. So I'm just going with my 3 side brushes, making sure that I'm cleaning the back side of the plate, the front side of the plate, then up and down. And once I'm done with that, I will just give it a thorough cleaning, just making sure that I'm cleaning also the sprocket, so the sprocket is not now dirty and dirty in my chain. So once I get both clean, I'm just going to be using a little bit of lubricant for chain. I decided to use Maxima. This is not a paid advertisement. This is just the one I like to use, and yeah, just giving me great results. And I keep it for a couple minutes so ensure that it's not going to be flinging if you were to run the bike as soon as you are applying it to your chain. Cool. So with a clean chain and lube chain, I am now moving to brakes. So I don't know, I'm gonna show you in a second, but the liquid through the window on that brake reservoir, it's awful. So it looked like coffee or Diet Coke, something like that. So just be very careful, because there's always the chance that you're gonna spill a little bit of, brake fluid. So be careful with your painted area. So that's why I'm using, a couple things, either like a rack or maybe underneath it, as well as some of that plastic just to cover for any accidental spills. So with the cover remove, I also removed the diaphragm, and now I'm pulling all that dirty brake liquid from my system, because I don't want that going in when I start to pump my brakes. So I'm just gonna be replacing that with new brake fluid. And once I have all that new brake fluid, I'm just gonna be, starting the process of pumping the remaining dirty brake fluid that's still remaining on the line. You probably know this by now, but when you're starting to, pump your brake fluid out, you want to start with the farthest caliper from your reservoir. So in this case, the reservoir is on the right side, so I'm actually starting on the left side, and then I will finish removing and pumping all that fluid out from my right side. Just ensure to be using whatever liquid it calls for your bike. In this case, most of the bikes, they use DOT4 for brake fluid, so make sure that you're using the correct fluid. I always like to keep a bottle with like either soapy water or whatever, just in case you have a spill. Even though I have all of my areas protected, I can always clean it up and make sure that I'm not gonna be getting, my paint faded or my paint eaten by, some of that fluid if I were to, spill it. So this is something that you can do with one person, can be done faster and much convenient with two persons. But if you don't have any help, you can keep one hand on the brake pumping, and then you open the valve, let it all out, making sure that you can always go back to refill your reservoir, so that you're not running your reservoir dry and inserting or allowing for air to get into the lines. All right, cool. So now that the brake fluid was actually coming clean on both sides, this is the time for me to refill the reservoir. I'm cleaning the excess of, any brake fluid that might have been pushed when I was adding or putting back the diaphragm and the cap. And now I'm moving to the reservoir in the rear, so I can remove and repeat the same process for the rear brake. I'm repeating the same process. I'm actually removing all that dirty and nasty brake fluid. And for this one, I'm actually adding more brake fluid again, and I hire my son just to help me to do the same process. So as you can tell, the actual bleeder is underneath the seat. So I have my son pumping the brake, keeping the brake with pressure. I open and crack open the valve, and then I get all the liquid out, and I repeat the same process as I did in the front. Okay, so I'm done at this point. I'm just gonna be cleaning the valve to ensure that there's no liquid or any brake fluid remaining outside of the system. I'm putting my seat back, and at this point I'm just gonna go to my cluster to ensure that I'm using the trip A or trip B as a reminder of when was the last time I did my service. So I can always keep a reminder on my phone, but I can always use the mileage as a reference point for that. So I'm just gonna go ahead and zero out trip number B, or trip letter B, I should say, and that way I know when I did it last.